Buying a laptop, whether it be for gaming or work, has become both easier and harder for you, the average consumer. It's easier as you now have a lot of options thanks to the overall market getting competitive with AMD, Nvidia, and Intel launching their CPUs and GPUs. If you followed our Computex 2024 coverage, we have new CPUs launching later this year, which signals a lot of promos for current devices. And those reasons are also what makes it harder. You have so many options to choose from with the various spec combinations of your CPU, GPU, RAM, and SSD. You've probably seen laptop specs listed online or at malls and probably asked the questions, is the extra 8GB RAM worth the price increase? There's one that has a better GPU, but the other one has better CPU. In scenarios like this, you're probably going to ask yourself, which one do I get? Or they both have the same specs, but one is more expensive than the other. Now, we have right here the Lenovo LOQ 15IRX9, and also we have the Acer Nitro V15. Both have i5 CPU, 8GB of memory, and an RTX 4050 GPU, but one is more expensive than the other, and does that automatically mean that more expensive is better? Well, let's take a closer look. Now, let's start with the specs. While both laptops have an Intel Core i5 CPU, the one on the Acer Nitro is an i5-13420H with only 8 cores and 12 threads, while the Lenovo LOQ 15IRX9 has 2 more P-cores for a total of 10 cores and 16 threads. So, on paper, we expect the Lenovo LOQ to win at least in CPU-intensive benchmarks unless Acer has better cooling, which we'll talk about later. Now, moving on to GPU, they both have RTX 4050 but have a different rated TGP. The Lenovo LOQ's RTX 4050 has a 95 watts TGP, while the Acer Nitro only has 75 watts TGP, and that's a 20 watts difference. Now, why is this important? TGP stands for Total Graphics Power, which indicates the maximum power that the GPU consumes under load. This is also a good indicator of the GPU's potential performance, as a higher TGP generally means higher clock speeds and therefore better performance and higher frame rates. Now, with that said, the 20 watts difference does not necessarily translate that the LOQ is better, as you still have other factors that come into play, such as cooling. Now, to round off the baseline specs, they both have an 8GB of DDR5 memory, but Acer has the faster memory at 5200 MHz as the LOQ's is rated at 4800 MHz. Both have the same 512GB of Western Digital SN740 Gen 4 SSD installed, and they have the same 1080p resolution panel, which makes our benchmarks comparison much easier. Now, before we dive into our productivity and gaming benchmarks, let's take a closer look at each device, as build quality, connectivity, and comfort also play a big factor when choosing a laptop, especially when the specs are neck and neck with our two laptops right here. Now, when it comes to build quality, both laptops have rocking plastic chassis, but they've got different design vibes. The one on Acer is surprisingly solid for its price point, with a design that's more subdued than previous Nitro models. It's got a smooth finished plastic lid that doesn't scream gamer but adds a touch of style with some of its cool gray and blue lines. The Lenovo LOQ, on the other hand, keeps things simple with an all-plastic build that's pretty sturdy, though it's a bit on the chunky side. I should also note that the overall design philosophy of the Lenovo LOQ is pretty much the same with Lenovo Legion, but in a less solid flavor. Connectivity-wise, both laptops are packed. The Nitro comes with a solid selection of ports, including USB-A, USB-C, HDMI, Ethernet, and even Thunderbolt 4 support. The LOQ isn't slacking either, offering a similar lineup with USB-A, USB-C, HDMI 2.1, and Ethernet. Both have you covered for connecting peripherals and external display. But what about comfort? The Nitro is surprisingly lightweight for a gaming laptop, tipping the scales at about 4.66 pounds. Now, this makes it more portable than some competitors. The keyboard on the Nitro gets props for having satisfying travel and clean backlighting. And as for the LOQ, it's a bit heavier at 5.4 pounds, which makes you think twice before tossing it in your backpack. However, it makes up for it with a spacious keyboard that also includes a numpad. Now, both laptops offer decent touchpad, but the LOQ's is noted to be large and responsive. The Nitro's touchpad is average, but gets the job done, in my opinion. Now for cooling, Acer Nitro V has a dual fan cooling system with 3 heat pipes spanning across the CPU and the GPU. As much as we want to tell you more about Nitro V's cooling system, we could not find any material, even from reviews showcasing the laptop's cooling system. Now, the Lenovo LOQ 15IRX9 on the other side incorporates its cold front hyperchamber cooling system, which is the same cooling system found on its higher-end Lenovo Legion laptops. The cold front hyperchamber optimizes heat exchanges by transforming the airflow and channeling the chip's hot air through a central hyperbaric chamber. Now, the bottom D cover separates the hot air expelled and the cold air drawn by the dual fan setup, resulting in cooler temperatures. Now, this new cooling system increases TDP dissipation by up to 25 watts, all while reducing the laptop's skin temperature by -2 degrees Celsius and lowering the fan noise by -2 decibels. Laptop displays are somehow overlooked as a factor when purchasing a laptop, and even in comparisons from other content creators. The display is often overlooked, where in fact this will round up your overall experience and will even dictate the laptop's capabilities beyond the internal specifications. Both devices have 15.6-inch 1080p, 144Hz IPS display, which is frankly the bare minimum for an entry-level gaming laptop. But what will set them apart is display quality. Now, what we did is we tested both laptops using Spider X Pro display analysis tool, and oh boy, the results are day and night. The Acer Nitro V measured 68% sRGB, 51% Adobe RGB, and 51% DCI-P3 on our display analysis. And to Acer's credit, this is what I would say an above-average display considering it's an entry-level laptop. But the Lenovo LOQ wipes the floor with its 99% sRGB, 70% Adobe RGB, and 79% DCI-P3 rating. Now, thanks to a wide color gamut, you could easily do professional level photo and video editing on the Lenovo LOQ. The Acer Nitro V has better blacks, albeit minimal, as the LOQ is only off by 0.01. Lenovo LOQ takes a second win with a much brighter panel overall, with the peak measured brightness of 320 nits over the Nitro V's dim 262.2 nit brightness. Now, I must say we only have a week to test out the two laptops, so we've streamlined the benchmark that we normally use on our reviews to fit the time constraint, of course, without compromising the goals of this video. And that is to see if the supposedly minor spec difference would matter. Now, our testing still follows our review process and benchmark methodology, so if you're interested in learning more and if you want to replicate things, you can read the article over at our site. Link is also here and also in the description box below. But the main takeaway is that we are comparing both laptops with the utmost fairness. Both laptops have the same version of Windows and same exact programs and apps installed, except for the respective management software, Vantage for the LOQ and NitroSense for the Nitro V. Now, we tested the laptops at their highest performance profiles with an auto fan setting, as we don't expect users to use 100% fan speed every time, and we don't recommend it as well due to the noise and wear and tear down the line. Now, starting with classic Cinebench R23, now, we could not run the latest 2024 version on both devices as they require 16 gigs of memory, but Cinebench R23 is still a relevant benchmark for enthusiasts and reviewers. The LOQ easily takes the crown in multi-core score thanks to the extra P and E cores. Now, Nitro V has scored higher on the single core, just to keep that in mind. Now, Geekbench shows the same story, the Lenovo LOQ taking the lead on multi-core, but Acer Nitro V keeps its single-core lead. Now, when it comes to productivity, the Lenovo LOQ takes the crown both in our PCMark 10 Extended benchmark and our UL Procyon Adobe Premiere Pro benchmark, thanks to the higher core CPU and higher TGP RTX 4050. Moving to 3D Mark, FireStrike shows identical performance, showing the DX11 limitation. TimeSpy shows a way higher score for the Lenovo LOQ, as the DX12 API is able to efficiently utilize the higher core count of the Intel Core i5 13450HX. Now, it is time for gaming benchmarks. Now, due to our limited time, we were only able to test 4 games. That's DOTA 2, Cyberpunk 2077, Returnal, and AC Mirage, or Assassin's Creed Mirage. Now, the games are tested at 1080p, and each game is benchmarked 3 times, and the results shown on your screen are the average results of each game. Lenovo LOQ shows a considerable lead over the Acer Nitro V on DOTA 2 at 1080p. The LOQ has 10% more average FPS and is more stable with an almost 20% higher 1% loss. The same can be said in Cyberpunk 2077, an arguably much more demanding title, with the Lenovo LOQ leading by about 6 FPS over the Nitro V and is still more stable with the higher 1% low. Now, the gap between the two widens as we run more heavy game titles, namely Assassin's Creed Mirage and also Returnal. Both games were dominated by the Lenovo LOQ, as much as 20 average FPS, but what seals the deal is the Lenovo LOQ's better game stability with much less stutters, as denoted by the 1% FPS. Now is a great time to take a look into the cooling to understand how the Lenovo LOQ dominated and why the Nitro V flunked. Starting with the CPU, both laptops clearly pushed the limit, albeit the Core i5-13420H on the Nitro peaked at 100 degrees, resulting in much more aggressive thermal throttling, hence the lower 1% FPS we were seeing earlier. Moving to the GPU, there's clearly a bit more headroom to optimize both the laptop's cooling performance, as both managed to stay relatively cool. Though it is worth noting that the superior cooling of the Lenovo LOQ, as its RTX 4050 has a higher TGP and thus produces more heat, yet it only peaked at 72.2 degrees throughout our testing compared to the Nitro V's 75 watts RTX 4050 at 68.5 degrees. Now, let's talk about battery. With great power comes less battery life. The Lenovo LOQ has a higher battery capacity of 60 watt-hour, as the Nitro V only has 57 watt-hour. But the more powerful components on the LOQ takes a toll on its battery life. In our modern office benchmark, the Lenovo LOQ only lasted 2 hours and 12 minutes, while the Acer Nitro V lasted more than 3 hours and 13 minutes. Now that we've taken a closer look at both laptop performance and build quality, the last aspect is price. Now, this is a tricky one, as at the time of filming, both laptops are on sale at $51,995 and $57,995, with the Lenovo LOQ commanding a 6,000 peso price premium. However, by the time this video is up, you only have about few days left before the price reverts to $62,999 and $59,995, with the Acer Nitro V being more expensive at $2,995. Now, keep those prices in mind as we round up what we've learned so far. Now, in terms of performance, the Lenovo LOQ is clearly the better laptop thanks to the higher spec Intel Core i5-13450HX and the higher wattage RTX 4050 GPU that's almost perfectly handled by the cold front hyperchamber cooling system. Almost because I think that the temperature balance of the CPU and GPU can be further optimized, as at a lower resolution of 1080p, the CPU plays a much bigger role in your FPS. Amping up the value of the Lenovo LOQ is a surprisingly good quality display. Sure, it's a 1080p panel, but its color gamut makes it viable for those looking towards using the laptop for photo and video editing, as not only does it have the performance to spare, but also a display that beats even some higher-end, more expensive laptops. So, with all that said, which one is the better choice for you? Well, as cliche as it may sound, the answer is, it depends. The obvious better laptop would be the Lenovo LOQ, especially when it comes to the display and also performance, but some may value the Acer Nitro's portability, aesthetics, and slightly longer battery life at the expense of performance. Now, going back to the price, the Acer Nitro V at its price is already a good buy for those on a budget. But if you could afford the 6,000 premium on the Lenovo LOQ, then every peso would be worth it with the upgrades you're getting. When it comes to SRP, the Lenovo LOQ is a no-brainer purchase. Now, regardless of what you're after in a laptop, I hope this video serves as an eye-opener to not take the displayed specs at face value and always do your research. We've certainly had a fun time testing these entry-level laptops and are more surprised at how much value the Lenovo LOQ offers. If you have more suggestions on which laptops should we compare next, feel free to comment it down below. Perhaps a higher-end rematch between the two, a Predator laptop versus a Legion laptop. Thanks again guys for watching. This has been Gian of Gadget Pilipinas. Salamat sa panonood. And I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!